Welcome to Power Up Podcast, the podcast that seeks to empower and dismantle, giving us the power and confidence to question, deconstruct, rebuild, and expand in life. I'm your host, Amma Rouge, voiceover and multidisciplinary artist, well-being advocate, food and book geek with over 14 years of movement-centered experience.
I am your host, Ella Mesmer, artist, choreographer, yogi and coach with a passion for alchemy, creativity, transformation and workplace wellness.
We recognise that we can't dismantle and empower or be empowered without first learning ourselves, diving deeper to unlearn the harmful, restrictive and unprogressive. It's an ongoing practice and journey for us all, which is why we created this podcast.
Our show features guests doing the work to enlighten, deconstruct and power up in their own magical ways.
We're going to be having conversations around the power of healing, transformation, well-being and creativity, and how they feed our personal and collective evolution, how they help us power up.
I was reflecting recently on a show that I did in 2020. It was the only show I did in 2020 because of lockdown. And it was such a gift to be able to make that show. It was a piece called Papillon, which I'd been kind of having ideas around and coming into over a few years. But in lockdown, I realized actually this is the time to really make this solo. And so we did kind of like a first phase of an R&D. And I did the performance. I did a live stream performance at the end of a week. It was a massive journey as well because, this is a piece on silks. It's a dance piece using a lot of kind of breaking and yoga moves, but it's a piece on silks. However, have I been up many silks in 2020 during lockdown?
No.
No. Yeah, so that was the first challenge. So what I realize now on reflection is big pat on my back because I put together a show in a week and performed it live stream.
Wow.
Yes.
Beast.
Thanks. However, Amma, the mind journey that I went on was completely different. So I we recorded this live stream. I came off of stage and should be going yeah, amazing, just done this thing, I'm so possible, wow. But instead I was like, it's not good enough. I didn't have time to finish the last section. I didn't feel good in that bit. I didn't feel like I really, all of the negative mind chat basically came in. And rather than coming off going, wow, I just did that in a week. I just put that thing together. I got my body strong enough. I pulled it off. I held my vision. I made the vision possible. I went on a journey of, it was awful, that with myself, it really felt like a failure.
I know that feeling.
Yeah, I guess many of us do. And I was speaking to someone this week, actually, a coaching client who had a really similar story. So I think I'm not alone. It's not a unique experience. But so what happened then was the piece came out, the performance happened, and I got to watch it. And when I watched it back, I realized actually it's all right. It's quite good. Maybe it's even good. And far from, the survival mode that I went into where I was literally I wanted the earth to swallow me up. It was like, oh my God, my life is over. I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have put myself out there, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
When I watched it, I was like, it was pretty awesome. I worked with a really dope musician called Marv Radio, and we did an interview at the end. And yeah, the whole thing, I was like, actually, I could have believed I was possible.
Yeah, the interview was dope as well.
Oh, thanks. Oh, yeah, you saw it. I forgot that you saw it.
What was intriguing about it is that watching it from an external perspective, I had no idea and would have had no idea that you were having those kind of thoughts. Or actually saying that, did you only have those thoughts when you watched it back, or were you feeling like that after you finished?
It was after I finished. So I was in the show. I was in it at the time of recording. But it was this coming off stage and being like, I could have done it better. I really speaking about, I can feel the emotions, this wanting to cry of it's not good enough. I need to, I'm not, if I show this to the world's over. All of that dread and fear.
Yeah, everything's going to come crashing down.
And obviously you get one take.
So yeah, that just confirms or further speaks to what I was saying, which is actually I didn't have that experience of it watching you perform and engaging with your interview afterward. And had you not told me this, I would have left just being like, that was wicked, that was great, I really enjoyed it, it was really different as well. So it was one of the few new online pieces of work I'd seen as well. You seemed really relaxed and afterwards and still inside it. So it's so incredible that there could often be like these layers of things going on in our minds, which don't necessarily always come to the fore to others, but we know there's all of this going on.
And these shadows, that, so we will be discussing or covering later on this series, I'm an Enneagram number 4, so I have a really strong not belonging belief. And that we can have this whole inner dialogue that no one else is aware of, that is basically like negative self-talk and not being kind to ourselves. And I would never speak to anyone else in the way that I spoke to myself in my mind at that moment. So I think it's so frustrating when we stop believing we are possible and that we can go on such a journey. And as an artist, to be making a piece of work that you want to share with the world, but then not really enjoying that experience in the moment. It's just, the power of the mind and how important it is to do the work so we can believe we are possible.
And in terms of the work, I feel like there are so many different things which make up the work. There are so many different types of resource that we can dive into to help us do this work. And just listening to what you were saying really makes me think about one of the ways I would say that I've done the work with myself, which was when I was being Rolfed by Giovanni, who I know you were Rolfed by as well. And I think actually you probably recommended him to me, which is probably how I found him. And for anyone that doesn't know, Rolfing is a type of body work, and it's different. It's completely different to massage, but there is the application of pressure and touch on different parts of the body, and it works through week by week and builds. And when I went to see Giovanni, I was in the middle of dance training. The vocational part of my dance, or I should say the institutional part of my dance journey, was quite traumatic, actually, I think, in a lot of ways. Now I look back, and I went to see Giovanni because there were just lots of things going on with my physical body that I felt Rolfing could attest to and really lend itself to help healing and realigning. And what's really interesting is when I went in for my last session, Giovanni said to me, you're now leaving as the queen you are. And your whole posture's changed, your whole energy's changed. And he said, when you came to me in the first session, and this is over 10 sessions, he said, you were so kind of crumpled in on yourself, and you really had this sense of not believing. Yeah. And now he was like, I can see and feel you're completely transformed. And so I think that the mind can really impact our physical body as well, and vice versa. And sometimes we're not even aware of it, and somebody else outside of us can really see that and make those connections. But it was just so wholesome for me to leave my sessions with him and realize and recognize that I had journeyed so much closer to believing in myself and believing I was possible. And still now that makes me feel so warm, and makes me, he's such a vital part of my journey.
It makes me think as well about how we hold ourselves and how that reflects, how our body reflects our mind, how we hold ourselves might change our opinion of ourselves, how our opinion of ourselves might change how we hold ourselves, and that kind of, that cycle. And just the power of getting our emotions in motion and the power of movement.
100%. Even the days where you don't want to bloody move, you just don't want to do it, and you make yourself, and then you're like, thank goodness for that, because it does really shift emotion and change our state.
So I'm going to move, just because I know we want to talk a little bit about these different kind of ways of looking at the mind. So I'm going to move to that. But this also made me think about kind of perfectionism and like how much does being a perfectionist. I definitely have some perfectionist tendencies, but I've actually found, I think we both talked about this, like my kind of coping method is often that I will, once I've got something out there, I won't look back at it, because, you know, we are essentially, as beings, we are whole, we are complete, we are perfection. So this kind of judgment and thinking that perfect isn't perfect, because perfect is exactly as it is in that moment. So now I am, if I recognize that I'm doing this negative mind, which is what I'm about to talk about, then perhaps it's better that I don't look at the thing and I put it out to the world and I let the world see it. And actually, you know, if those people want to judge, they can spend their time judging, but that's not going to affect what I'm going to continue to put out into the world and how I'm going to live my life. So, as you all know, I'm a Kundalini teacher and a yoga teacher, a vinyasa teacher. And I just think this is such an interesting kind of concept to share, the idea of the negative mind, the positive mind, and the neutral mind, which kind of links back to also what I was talking about Muji. So the negative mind, so in yoga, we teach that you have these three minds, and that ultimately, rather than always seeing things as a polarity of good and bad and right and wrong, we recognize these three states exist, and we can take from each of them. So the negative mind is also called the protective mind, and it's that kind of the idea of survival. It's what we've learned in order to survive. So, you know, for example, we've learned that to cross the road, we stop, we look, we listen. So we think about these things. We learn these things, we learn to survive, and we make an adaptation. And sometimes we might make a really good, sensible adaptation. For example, stop, look, listen. Sometimes we might learn something that links into our belief. So it might be, I'm going to give a few examples. I don't belong, which I definitely have a tendency towards. And then you will experience life with that being proved to you and having that negative kind of perception of the world. Or I'm not capable, or for example, I'm not possible. And then we learn those things. We see the possible negative outcome in an experience. A negative mind can be a positive in that it can help us to kind of listen to our inner guidance around protecting ourselves, being patient with and listening to what our body is telling us, connecting deeply, like this is in its highest form, you know, with our kind of inner guidance and our own spirituality.
Yeah.
But I think in a negative place, if it's kind of not developed, if we haven't done the work to understand all those thoughts. So for example, you know, these are our stories, this is my belief, being able to recognize that and go, okay, I see that, I can choose to rise up. If we haven't developed it, then it's almost like that mind cycle can win, and we end up, you know, being really self-destructive, having really low self-esteem. Maybe that will affect our relationships with other people.
And we end up believing that that's the truth, that it is our truth, and it layers itself on top of our true essence and effectively gets in the way of who we truly are.
Yisu. So then the positive mind is about positivity. It's about equality. It sees the positive in everyone and in every situation, which is a beautiful quality, right?
Yes, it is.
It can also give us that kind of strong like sense of will to go for what it is that we want, to have this like ideal of what that thing is. It will mean that we're super optimistic, we're super playful. I love to be around optimistic people. I would say the only thing about the positive mind that could be, you know, judged on that polarity of negative is if we don't want to see the reality. But yeah, finally, the third mind that is taught in yoga is the neutral mind, and that being almost like the meditative mind. You know, that's what we're doing in mindfulness, is we're coming back to that neutral space. It's being able to be objective, being able to see like what's true for you, but also kind of being connected. So, you know, in the negative, we can be quite like an individual.
Yeah.
In the neutral mind, you can be quite connected, but at the same time, without being needy, you know, without be without being dependent on anyone or anything, without connecting or identifying with possessions, or like being really fixed on the outcome. So, an example of that positive mind, being like, this is how this is going to work out for me. But then if it doesn't work out for you, kind of like crashing back down to the negative, which I guess links to what we were talking about in terms of those failures or perceived failures of like, like my sharing that show.
Yeah.
I had this idea of how I wanted it to turn out. It didn't turn out exactly as I wanted and had rehearsed in my mind. But actually, the neutral is like not being so fixed on the outcome.
Yes.
Our ego not being so involved in the journey, and being able to really be in touch, like you said earlier, about being in touch with our essence and who we really are, not identifying with the things in the world, but really coming back home to ourselves and our oneness and our connection and our perfection and wholeness and completion and purity. We talk a lot about alchemy on this show. So going back to alchemy and this idea of looking at our lead, our stories, our subconscious, and then going to our higher conscious, our higher self, this, what am I without my stories? What would I love? That being able to understand that doesn't mean going into that positive space where we're so attached to the outcome, becomes very desperate, or we're not seeing the reality, or we're becoming, like, one thing I noticed when I first started to kind of work with alchemy is I was so set on the end result, on creating what I wanted to create, that I actually stopped living in the present moment. So like, how can we do all that and be very present and be in our intuition and really enjoy the fruits of life?
I also want to just say that I also really appreciate my ego, and I personally believe my ego helps me because I learn so much about my beliefs and where they're getting in the way, and then I can step outside of them. But it's not for me a case of kind of fighting or disliking my ego. I'm really grateful for it. It also keeps me in check.
And I appreciate you making that distinction, because I think it's something that can often be overlooked. So thank you for sharing that, Belle. I believe we can change our beliefs. What do you think?
If you look at us 5 years ago and you look at us now.
Enough said. Yep. Are there any practices or techniques that you've engaged with that you feel have allowed you, enabled you, empowered you to step more into believing you're possible?
One big up to a technique that I love is TRE. Maybe we'll get Marlena on here to talk about TRE. So I trained in Thailand, actually. I did just my level 1 TRE training via her, and it's just, I've been doing it for quite a few years. Like, it really started when I was making a piece of dance called Ladylike, but realizing, how, we collect up these little traumas in our body every single day, and how much a regular practice of releasing them.
Yeah, for real. And you introduced me to TRE, and I think it's awesome.
We both agree we can create new beliefs. Let's talk a bit about how we work with this. How do we shift the power? What do we do to step into our higher conscious? How do we step into believing that we are possible, possibly without that kind of being so attached to the outcome, but truly standing in our power and our joy?
It's an ongoing journey for sure, and I'm definitely very much aware of that. And I think it's really helpful to me to be able to look back at where I was 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 10 years ago, and witness how my mindset has changed and how that in turn has impacted the way I interact with opportunities that present themselves, the way I'm able to step more fully into my power and become more aware of it, the way my confidence and self-belief has increased. And there's so much more room for it to do so more and more and more and more, which is really exciting, actually, as much as it's, sometimes this journey feels quite scary in a lot of ways. It's also really comforting to see where I've journeyed from, and to think about, wow, the possibility of therefore where I can go and the capacity that is still there. I I think it's a combination of different tools for me. I think one, having a constant awareness and knowing that I'm going to find myself back in the negative mind at moments and in seasons of my life. And there's a constant reprogramming that I'm doing to continue to find myself in the neutral mind, moving from that heart space, and also the positive mind, in the positive realm of it. So I think this idea of ever completely arriving and never having to work through restrictive beliefs or the unhelpful familiar, which, are ideas and beliefs that maybe guide our decisions and influence our experience through which we see the world. And because those feelings or those ideas are familiar, we may continue to feed them, but actually they're not really helpful to us. They keep us boxed in. And I'm aware that that's there now. And now I have that awareness. I can choose when I'm putting the power there and when I'm not. So I think that's been really eye-opening for me, and that's part of my reprogramming journey. And I think a lot of being able to believe I'm possible and to continue to grow in that thinking and grow in both confidence and belief in it comes down to active, continuous reprogramming. So I'm doing that with my beliefs. I'm doing that around my ideas of money. And I'm doing that through different exercises, through reading, through journaling. I love mantra. I have choices that I choose every day that I say out loud, which is as a result of doing work with William Whitecloud, doing his Create Your Destiny program. And one of them in particular, which is I choose the end result of receiving and accepting my heart, letting it guide me and ground me. That is definitely a mantra that helps me continue to stay in a place of faith, and not get too caught up in my head. And I always find that it's this fine balance and this fine dance between trusting and being faithful, being active, so co-creating with the universe, but knowing that there's a dance between it. It's not all going to come from you pushing and doing and being super yang, and it's not all going to come from you chilling and sitting back and just visualizing. Yoga really helps center me. It helps me listen. It helps me feel into sensation and notice where my mind is at. Notice whether I'm in negative, neutral, positive mind. It shows me any resistance that's coming up for me. And it just allows me to then make a choice about what I want to do with that, how I want to set out and stride into my day, how I maybe want to shift. If I am in that place, what can I do to shift my vibrational state into a higher state? And so it's a continuous set of choices. It's a continuous choosing. Journaling also helps me, helps get everything out of my head and on the page, and again brings me awareness, allows me to then make a choice from being aware of where I am. And the repetition of doing all of this is what is allowing me to stay in a space where I believe I'm possible as much as possible. And also talking with friends about it, talking with friends like we're talking now about these kind of ways of moving through the world and developing ourselves, and peeling back the layers so we can access our true essence. All of this is really helpful for me, and having examples around me, having friends and family who lead by example, is also something that helps me, that reinforces that we are possible.
So beautiful, Amma. Yes, sir. I say yes to all of those things, all of those ways as well. Important parts of living our best life. But as you all know, I'm a coach, and I coach, and I am also coached. And I really think it's such a powerful way to shift the power, to understand what it is that we are believing and why we're believing that, and then shift back up into, well, what do I want to create? So that for me is a constant work, for myself and for my clients. I use a lot of intuition into working into that. And I love now understanding my stories so that I can shift them. And then like on that note, like linking back to Mooji, I love to also check myself, like when I'm making a judgment of someone else or of myself, to just check that and recognize what I just did, and that I choose not to have those thoughts. And I also have a beautiful list of what I am available for and what I'm no longer available for on a daily basis. This is what I'm available for in my life, and these are the things that I'm not prepared to think or to experience anymore, actually. And if those things come up, then I very easily can go, that's a no, and this is a yes.
That's so powerful, Belle. It's really powerful, and it allows you to stay focused on what you will and won't allow in your life, and therefore allows you to keep moving in the direction of your possibility, right? Carving out the life you desire. It actually reminds me of something really powerful that Jen Sincero says in You Are a Badass at Making Money. She says, when you get a hit on what's holding you back and realize what you need to do to move forward, act immediately. You are battling very deeply ingrained and up until this moment, extremely successful limiting beliefs that have been your truths for your entire life. If you hesitate when you get a knowing hint, you give those familiar limiting beliefs the time and space to take over again. Hesitation is the crack that all your favourite excuses will burst through, drown out your resolve, and sweep you back to the safety of your comfort zone. Listen to your intuition. Trust universal intelligence over your fears. Have faith that what you desire already exists, and leap like the mighty badass that you are. You can do it.
I'm going to make that my mantra for this week.
What are you making your mantra for this week? We love you guys. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. Thank you so much for your continued support. Collective Evolution every Sunday. Let's do this together.
You beautiful beings. As always, it's such a pleasure to take this journey with you. Thank you to the amazing goddess that is Ama Rouge.
Thank you to the wonderful goddess that is Ella Mesmer.
We love you. Thank you for listening. You can connect to us and our guests via the links in each episode's show notes. Before you go, we invite you to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of the goodness to come. And if you enjoyed today, perhaps tell a friend to tell a friend. We are always grateful for you, our listeners, for our fabulous guests, and to everyone who has contributed to and been a part of our journey here.
Our music is by Tomo Carter. Everything else is brought to you by us, the Power Up Power Team.
I'm Ella Mesmer.
I am Ama Rouge. And we are Power Up Podcast.